funny they say no pressure at all. Hello, neighbors. It's really my honor to be here to introduce the mayor at this State of the City address, and it should be fine because my State of the City address was only 55 minutes, so I'll only take about half that, Eric. It won't be bad. You'll be okay. You know, I was reading at all the community committees that you're on, Eric, and I was going through them. Metro Regional Planning, Metro Director, Metro Council on Regional Transportation, Metro's Finance Committee, Metro Mayor's Committee, of which I chair, which makes me a bit elevated from them, Metro Caucus of Committee Chairs, Fraser Valley Regional Library Board, Board of Variance. Are you getting embarrassed yet? I'm embarrassed for you. Langley Tourism Board and your own foundation. My goodness, what are you doing? Trying to build a resume or something, Eric? What's going on here? You will notice, though, I never once used the word Metro Vancouver. That term offends me to my core, and I hope it offends everyone here. We in Surrey call it Metro Surrey, but I'm okay with calling it anything other than Metro Vancouver. So as long as you're with me on that, we'll get along just fine. I actually do think, though, Metro Surrey has a pretty nice ring. We in the South Fraser need to paddle our own canoe. There is just no doubt about that, and I think that everyone that lives in the south of the Fraser, pays taxes in the south of the Fraser, knows that all too well. Hi, John. Just saw you there. This is cool. I know just about as many people as you do here, Eric. It's good. We are not a bedroom or the cash cow for the rest of the region any longer, and we will not be. And I know Eric shares that with me. We talk about that often. Eric was just at my State of the City address just yesterday, and he was taking great notes. So if you were at mine yesterday and you hear anything similar, you'll know. I actually did a hell of a job. It was freaking awesome. You feel that way after you've done it, because I tell you, these things really do put you to your paces. But I really do want to talk about the symbiotic relationship that Surrey has with Langley. And in fact, in many ways, misery loves company. And so I will say this on behalf, I think, of both of our cities, and I'm sure Eric will talk to some of this as well. When it comes to healthcare, education, public transportation, social infrastructure, we know that our cities in the south of the Fraser are grossly underserved. Eric and I work on those projects a lot. We talk about that a lot, and I am so grateful to have a relationship with someone who actually gets that. It's long overdue that the province recognizes that Surrey and the township are areas that need to be treated with much more respect and start funding us accordingly. And that is where Eric and I shine the brightest. The good news is when our two teams walk into the room at Metro, to that other name, meetings, people cringe. They sometimes cringe more about Eric because he throws some pretty good zingers at them, but they cringe because they know we're not putting up with it any longer. Actually, Surrey and the Township of Langley at the Metro table are a force to be reckoned with, and I thank Eric every day for our relationship there, because we do have to make some significant and serious changes. And we are making an impact. It's not easy, and it's going to take strategy and a bit of a long-term plan, but we all know that Vancouver has dominated Metro Vancouver for a very long time. So it's time that we actually put our shoulder to it. But there's so many other ways that Eric and I work to, or manipulate together, whether it's bus rapid transit in Surrey. Surrey is the number one location for bus rapid transit, and the township is number 2. And speaking of number 2, I understand Langley has a new animal waste bylaw. I never heard such a thing. But it was awesome to know, because I was just at the Cloverdale Rodeo talking to some of the horse people, and they said if I was coming to the township that I needed a horse crap bag because you guys pick it up. That's awesome. You guys are awesome. So I thought tomorrow when I'm at the rodeo, I'm going to hand out horse crap bags for anybody coming to the township. You never know. In so many other ways, too, though, we are on the same page. And I was going to say you were following in my footsteps in some ways when it comes to the RCMP. But just to let you know, there's no more money in the police transition budget. We took it all. And so that won't be there for you. But I really do wish you well in everything you're doing on that. It's not an easy task for sure. You know, it's difficult for me to do this. How many people were here last year? Yeah. So Brad West was just bloody awesome last year. He knows, and I had so much pressure on me because I kept thinking, what would Brad say? So anyway, I'm saying what Brenda says. I did want to ask you, though, have you taken over the city of Langley yet? Or when is that happening? That's not happening. Okay. I know it's somewhere on somebody's agenda. Bailey's just going down. He's not going to enter into that debate. But I do want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for inviting me to be they said just to introduce you, and then somebody else said to roast you, and I thought, I don't know, I'll do something in the middle. But I do want to thank you for inviting me. I am so very honored to get to work with Eric. You know, what we do in the South Fraser matters for everybody. We make a difference. We are the economic engine of the province of British Columbia. We will be moving forward. We are the only place in the province of British Columbia where they will be able to see the kind of growth that is going to be happening in our region. And so when I say buckle up to everybody in Surrey and in the township here, I mean it. We are going to be under huge strain to produce housing and all the pieces that go with it. So with all that growth, we need the other guys on the other side of the pond to step up too. And they need to step up in terms of infrastructure. And I know Eric and I are shoulder to shoulder on that one, because what works for us in Surrey works in Langley and vice versa. We really need each other at those tables. So I want to thank you, Eric, for being a good friend to Surrey and supporting us in our ventures, and we'll be there for you as well. It's a great relationship for all of us in the South Fraser. Thank you all.
I have no idea why the province of British Columbia decided to take on Brenda Locke. I reminisce and wonder about that all the time. You know, but first of all, good evening to everybody who's here tonight. I do appreciate you all taking some time out to come and hear about some of the things that have been. Is there anything been going on in the Langleys this week? May have been a few news articles and stories out there. I wonder if you're going to ask me about that one in a bit. But first of all, of course, I want to thank Brenda for that introduction. And it can't be understated how much I enjoy working with Brenda and the entire council that she's fortunate enough to have. There are so many regional shared interests south of the Fraser. They can't really be listed in a short period of time. And especially as Surrey prepares to be the first city in the province with more than 1 million people. So it's not a joke when we talk about, Metro Vancouver needing to consider what this looks like when you have something the size of Surrey happening on the other side of the Fraser River. And thanks to Richard Zussman for being here tonight, for questions upcoming, which I really wanted to find more time for this year, and I'm looking forward to it. And the food is free this year, indeed, covered for us this year with sponsorships from Fortis and Preston GM. So I want to thank them for that. Not your tax dollars, and helping us address concerns about that at the very least. And thank you to the LEC and all the staff here for putting this evening together for us here tonight. And a round of applause for them as well. Thank you very much. There's a pretty good quote that I saw recently that's not mine, and I couldn't find out who it was attributed to. And it goes that the federal government has the money, the provincial government has the power, and the local government has the problems. And I would add, takes the blame. The fact is, local governments, like the Township of Langley, are not responsible for so many things that we need because of our growth. Hospitals, schools, highways like number 1 and number 10 Glover Road, supportive or affordable housing, homelessness, and social services that we get asked to do all the time. The Township of Langley, within its borders, is responsible for parks, recreation facilities, libraries, fire protection, policing, bylaw enforcement, community planning, and maintaining local infrastructure like roads, bridges, culverts, reservoirs, boulevards, and so on. Local governments are responsible for community planning, approving the housing we need, but the right housing in the right places. But obviously, that new housing places more and more pressure on existing hospitals, schools, and highways, which the province must fund, especially as they demand and allow more and more housing, but they demand for us to allow more and more housing anywhere and everywhere urban. And in the Township of Langley, as was mentioned, our growth rate, our population is now 155 to 160,000. Up from last year at a pretty steady pace, about that 3,000 to 5,000 per year. 3,300 housing units are under construction. Despite current market challenges, we continue to grow at about the same pace, only down a few hundred units from this time last year. We have 7,500 housing units approved, able to proceed at any time, not including the density that was handed out by the province under Bills 44 and 47. With the City of Surrey, we are the last municipalities in Metro Vancouver with so much non-ALR land, yet we will remain for a long time, if not forever, mostly rural. It's a unique combination that to be growing as we are, but mostly in one compact area, Willoughby and Willowbrook, to be in both Metro Vancouver and Fraser Valley at the same time, concentrating our growth with much better economies of scale overall. We can still plan better than we have for new infrastructure, new facilities, new parks, swimming, hockey, rugby, soccer, and lacrosse, access to rapid or frequent transit, while again, 75% of Langley remains in the agricultural land reserve, rural and protected from development. With all that, still heading to 250,000 people. And by being focused on what the Township of Langley is actually responsible for, we can plan for and become the best place in Metro Vancouver to raise a family. And I'll be talking a bit about that in a bit. A great place to retire, to invest, build a business with so much current and future livability potential because of that unique configuration to be rural and grow as we are. We can still find the right places for community centers, new urban parks, schools, and sports fields that we know we will need for 250,000 people, and get that going and in place now before it's too late. To achieve that, we have to invest now in facilities, invest in parks and amenities, invest in roads and infrastructure, as well as find a way to replace aging infrastructure, which we have a lot of. Reservoirs in Walnut Grove, Aldergrove, and Brookswood, kilometers of asbestos water mains, failing culverts and bridges that need to be replaced. Local governments are required to balance their budgets. We can't run billion-dollar deficits and call it a success. Yet we have to find a way to pay for it all. Unique level of government in that regard. As construction costs rise and rise again, 25% in just the last few years. And to stay focused on that goal, getting things done again, this past year specifically, has been a busy one. And bear with me here. It's a long list, actually. And if I leave something out, people will say I don't care about it. But I care about it all, a lot, large and small. For housing and better urban planning, new neighborhood plans this year for Brookswood Fern Ridge for a second time in 2 years. And in Willoughby, new plans for Williams and Smith, east of 208th Street. Better walkability, more park spaces, additional tree and environmental preservation, and predictable known densities for schools especially, a real problem with Bill 44. Council completed this year an updated reference plan for new ideas for 200th Street. 200th Street 2040, planning for bus rapid transit, especially combined with a public draft concept for the future of the Langley Event Center here at 80th Avenue, not a secret one. LEC 2040 with housing, hotel, convention center, office spaces, and a performance and concert hall, a long-term plan that can evolve and receive input over a long period of time. Council has also started this year finally putting the Affordable Housing Fund within our Community Amenity Contributions Program to work. 3 sites, 3 buildings, starting construction this year, 400 units in partnership with the provincial government and a grant from BC Builds, a new thing for the Township of Langley. With these rental buildings will be owned and operated by our community's Langley Housing Trust, not BC Housing or Metro Vancouver, with rent staying in Langley to build more affordable units for Langley in the future. At the end of 2024, staff completed our new housing needs report for the next 5 years, required and dictated by the province using a new calculation methodology dictated to all municipalities by the Ministry of Housing. A little bit of overlooked element to Bill 44. With a process that appears local, but isn't, is provincial. The province is now mandating that the Township of Langley complete 14,000 new housing units over the next 5 years. Our housing need. This is up from 6,500 units every 5 years before, roughly double the rate that we were already growing. We obviously can't accommodate that. We actually need to slow down a bit to catch up, not add even more growth. This housing need is just made up, of course. It's absurd and it's unachievable. But if we must have a plan for it, which we must, it makes sense to do that to be on 200th Street and in Willowbrook, which is what this council is endorsing. There will be access to transit, so we can try to preserve some lower density plans elsewhere, like Brookswood and Fern Ridge, where there is no real expectation of quality transit in most areas in my lifetime. So whether we like it or not, without access to transit to the same levels of Vancouver and other communities take for granted, most areas of the township will remain car dependent. This is just a fact. And so for roads, after years of no plan, largely ignoring the issue, as I see it, we are getting it done for major roads as fast as we can. And I won't list them all, but now starting this year, current status, there are 28 road projects underway at various stages from detailed design to construction. 208th Street, Phase 1 is finally almost done. I swear it's not my fault. It's not my fault. The staff have been doing a great job on these major projects, trying to get them going as fast as possible and coordinating with utility companies and others to not rip the road up again right after it's finished. Phase 2 is well underway, with township fiber optics added, and again, delays from BC Hydro and other coordinations, upgraded, undergrounded infrastructure, so the road won't be ripped up a second time, all substantially finished by the end of the year. as we said we would do, 208th Street is getting done. And then next up after that, 80th Avenue at Yorkson Community Park to 212th Street, 86th Avenue from 200th Street, 202 Street are both funded to start this year. We are finishing 72nd Avenue at 198th Street, and council is underway with finally opening up 202 Street to the Carboth Transit Exchange, Highway 1, and to Walnut Grove. Within a few years, we will have 3 north-south corridors in addition to 200th Street and a finished 208th Street. This will make a huge improvement in how we get around, and it's getting done. As we need to keep our focus on more than just Willoughby, the widening of Fraser Highway to Aldergrove continues for Salmon River and other communities. Fraser Highway at 224th Street is underway, and 240th Street should be ready to get underway by the end of the year. In Fort Langley, portions of 88th Avenue, that is a truck route, are being upgraded for safety, better sidewalks, lighting, and active transportation, just like 96th Avenue was. With real progress, finally, on the changes to the North Langley truck route that have been on the shelf since 2018, with all of it in detailed design to get underway, especially 232nd Street and Rollison Crescent. 96th Avenue and 216th Street is being aligned and signalized as a phase 1 of finishing 96th Avenue to Port Kells. After more than a decade, this is my favorite actually, after more than a decade of talk and then some more talk, Old Yale Road at 5 Corners is being replaced and upgraded. What had to have been the worst road in all of Langley for a long time. The implementation of traffic calming continues, more and more of the list each year to make our streets safer, especially at our parks and schools. Now, I get a lot of complaints about the state of our roads, and the irony is I agree. We can all drive around and see that we have a lot of roads in rough shape. It's always been the worst in May, of course, after winter, but just before the summer paving program, we also have a lot of roads that need to be rehabilitated or replaced, and very soon, especially in our rural areas, actually. More to come on that very soon, I promise. Proposal to council coming. A big catch-up program is needed, and we've been working on it. Roads, roads, roads. We get it, and we're on it as fast as we can. Now, for public safety, council this year added more bylaw enforcement officers, moving towards service hours of 6 a.m. to midnight. With new renovated space for our bylaw team at the civic facility that they need and deserve. 2 additional RCMP members added again in 2025, making 9 added in 3 years, 29 in 10 years. 2 more next year, with capital investments getting underway in the RCMP detachment, improvements for mental health to improved security. And as you may have heard, we have achieved substantial deintegration of the Langley RCMP detachment shared with Langley City. Replaced with, for us, dedicated to serving the Township of Langley with our members serving our residents. Yep. Thank you. For fire, a new fire hall for Brookswood Fernridge. Open in early 2026, the first new fire hall the township has built in 20 years, despite adding 70,000 residents over that time. Built to post-disaster standards, better location, and sized for the future. Health, for those who don't know, response times in Brookswood were unacceptable, and it's being dealt with. Hall 3 in Aldergrove is being renovated for basic health, equipment management, and full-time service, and $3.5 million for Hall 6 in Murrayville to fix a leaking roof that went on for years, and aging HVAC as well, with a few more upgrades to finish off some big improvements to Hall 4 in Willoughby. 11 new firefighters were added in 2025. That's 26 in 3 years now, with additional funding for better training and equipment, and a multi-year apparatus order we've all heard about. It's famous now for more water capacity and a standardized fleet that saved the township taxpayers millions. and guaranteed new fire trucks on time and on budget for years. A few that even the next day they were delivered were in service on the explosion fire in Routley, just a few blocks from Hall 4 in Willoughby. A multi-year deal that is now the envy of a lot of other municipalities, to be sure. Is that true? I would say it is. Yeah. For parks now, an amazing update for Noel Booth Community Park. So needed. The restoration of Holiday House starts this year. I think we've owned it for 20 years, and it's sat there boarded up. While planning for an updated Fort Langley waterfront and pedestrian overpass to finish the Fort to Fort Trail continues. A new 5 to 6 acre Glen Valley Marina Park and boat launch is underway with waterfront cleanup and access upgrades, the first phase. The boat launch will be in Fort Langley, but we'll have two. There's a lot of confusion about some of that. Josette Danderand Northeast Latimer Neighborhood Park. I had to look that up because it was recently changed. So make sure I got it right. It was finished in 2025, if you remember. A year before the elementary school, finally. So something like Donna Gabriel Elementary School not having a playing field for 2 years never happens again. And with planning underway for Northwest Latimer Park now, for the school there, and Smithview Park at the Jericho Reservoir. And council has also started the process for 2 new municipal-sized parks. One in Glen Valley, the Nathan Creek Municipal Park, on 300 acres along 264th Street, and a new municipal park in Willoughby before it's too late, but we still have the undeveloped land to even consider it. It's one of the biggest things I also hear about. What about a park for Willoughby? One that isn't sports fields. And the residents that raised that with me, they're right. As densities are continually increasing on 200 Street and in other updated plans, Council, I'm so glad, endorsed creating a new Parks Master Plan separate from recreation facilities to ensure that we will have the park spaces we need for Willowbrook as well. Actual park spaces that you can go and be in a park without having to get in your car. And then for recreation, which I like to think about separately from parks. The new ice sheets and dry arenas project is coming along. And if you see, like outside when you came in, it is looking fantastic. 3 new ice sheets and 2 year-round dry floors, 380 parking stalls below grade. I have toured it twice, and I can't wait for everybody here to see it. It is going to be a remarkable facility. And the staff here, I think we're forced to come tonight. Is that right? No, the team under Scott and Jason and everybody else having a part in it, the user groups, they've done an amazing job coming up with that. It got underway very quickly. It's pretty cool, actually, the way it's being built and what's being delivered for what it's costing. It will help define the Langley Events Center as a campus truly like no other. Dry floors for volleyball, hockey, lacrosse, for the community, right? For youth and adults to play sports, learn to skate, and accommodate future population growth for a long time for so many youth that just want to play sports other than at midnight. And that leads me to soccer with so much unmet demand, which again, some of the figures I'm going to get to in a minute. Construction continues on Smith Athletic Park. 20 acres, 3 new soccer fields ready this year, and a 4th fully enclosed ready by the end of next year, with training rooms, seating, offices, constructed in direct consultation with our user groups to support our 100-year-old Langley United Soccer Association and our Aldergrove Soccer Clubs for what they need. So many programmable all-weather hours will be possible for so many with this structure, especially younger players that need to get home at a reasonable hour. And all around it, if you look, 676th Avenue and the new 208A Street are almost finished, with the new 212 connector underway from 208th Street as well. is another one of my favorites. We finally implemented priority registration for residents to get access to swimming lessons. All right, registered programming that, because we're so behind as a community with access to facilities that we need for the population growth we have, this is something we had to do. And it's expanding as we finalize that new aquatic facility, including the Aldergrove Water Park, which was a request for a long time, with more fee reductions for super senior to 50 cents per day. If you don't know what super senior is, you have to be yes. We'll all know what it is at some point. Reductions for all seniors and youth. And I would like to do more in 2026 and the years ahead as council hopefully continues with a few more incremental fee reductions for key categories like those, especially youth, over the next few budgets. For our business community specifically, big reforms this year to business licensing with annual fee reductions for most categories. Business licenses, in my opinion, should be affordable, should be reasonable. They're not a tax. They're not a revenue source on business. Business pays enough. We are now the only municipality that staff can find that offers multi-year business licenses with discounts. If nothing changes, and nothing will change in your business, you can get a business license for 5 years and not think about it again. Council completed other reforms for licensing to secondary suites, eliminating a lot of costly red tape. Secondary suites are no longer annual business licenses, if you can believe that, they were business licenses, to be tracked down and paid every year. This is done away with, and they're on the property taxes now. The annual infrastructure fees is being cut by half to the same rate for all suites in any main category by 2026. And again, I'd like to see council reduce those even further. A supply of legal, safe secondary suites is a good thing, and they're reflected in the value of the home and therefore in the property taxes that they pay already. Let's not tax them even further. And yes, this is going to be my least favorite part of the speech. And yes, there is now a separate utility statement for garbage, water, and sewer, no longer combined with our property taxes. Because utilities are distinct, actually. They're operated and budgeted separately from services that are provided in our property taxes. They're separate entities because not everyone is a member of them. And only those that are getting the services of them contribute to them. So they're different than property taxes, which everyone pays. And yes, as annoying as some are finding it, and I know we often assume the worst in any change, there are a ton of benefits to the reform. We are one of the last urban municipalities with a big population to do it. Residents can see exactly what they're paying for. It allows for voluntary water metering to only pay for the water you actually use, which you can't do today. You can do it this year, but you couldn't do it last year. Council can consider options to make it more fair for apartments and townhouses over time. People can choose to be billed quarterly, perhaps even monthly, like other utilities do. BC Hydro doesn't send us an annual bill for electricity. Why do we get one for water and sewer? A lot of municipalities, you don't. Voluntary water meters detect water leaks in the system, and we all currently pay for those. And it will help people lower their cost of living. Water and sewer infrastructure in Langley is expensive. Kind of unfortunate for us that way because Metro Vancouver only delivers the water to our western boundary, and then we have to get it to Brookswood or Fort Langley or Gloucester and Aldergrove at our cost, and then back again as wastewater. Lots of other municipalities get distribution right through the middle of their cities, really saving them a lot of money. We have to reform the system a little bit, or the costs of water, where no one has any incentive to use any less of it. We're all going to be paying more. And council took the initiative to solve it. It's not fair that a senior on fixed income in a studio apartment pays the same as a new fourplex on a single-family lot will. And so, yeah, once again, because of the province as well, we have to make these changes perhaps sooner than we would have thought necessary. I believe in it. It has benefits, which is why I voted for it, as did 7 other members of council. Another reform planning for the future. Other progress, a new strategic plan for Langley Regional Airport to 2045, developed with key stakeholders, an outline of potential expansion, new investments, and improved economic sustainability over time to really ensure that it's not dependent on property tax revenue as much as we can. And I had to prove to the airport community that I wasn't trying to close it. Green burials are not available at Langley, are now available at Langley Lawn in Brookswood. Langley Lawn in Brookswood. Holiday Lights in Williams Park is now bigger and better than ever. A free family event with all donations supporting the Aldergrove Food Bank for 5 years. And for Christmas 2024, $55,000 in verified, quantified donations that help those that need it. Council also completed the largest grant in Township Langley history to Meals on Wheels in Aldergrove. Fabulous thing, granting ownership of the Aldergrove Station House, registering it as a heritage asset, a 25-year agreement to support them, support those all over Langley that need their help, and to help and support other community organizations there as well. And a new 2025 2-year investment plan for Translink that includes more funding for the major road network paving program. A lot of that credit goes to the City of Surrey and Brenda. Funding for the detailed design of bus rapid transit on 200 Street. I'm still trying to make it the first corridor, by the way, over the next few years, because it's going to be a lot cheaper than Brenda's corridor. Yeah. And finally, after how many years, we finally have transit service coming to Gloucester Industrial Estates. I don't have to listen to Kevin Quinn anymore ask me why they put an industrial park in the middle of nowhere and why it's his problem. And I'm told that will start next year. And yes, being on the TransLink board, thanks to my colleagues, definitely helped me get that done for us. The 2025 budget followed up from 2023 and 2024 with more big catch-ups in public safety, a real theme this term, with 90% of this year's property tax increase for public safety improvements only. 90% for fire, police, and bylaw enforcement. So we all know exactly where our money is going. But 2.1% of this year alone was for RCMP increases imposed from Ottawa. They're very unpredictable, and they're tough to absorb on any given year. And to offset those, line by line, we lowered other costs for municipal services for the 3rd straight year, down another almost 0.5%. Fleet management to extend vehicle life and reduce rental costs is under review. Over our first 3 budgets, we've actually lowered operating costs equivalent to a 2.1% property tax increase with attrition, cost cutting in some programs, and changes to debt supported by property taxes, including paying off the debt on the LEC after 20 years, which was in our property taxes this whole time, now gone. Yeah. So we do have a long-term debt management plan. It's for capital, not for operating, like the other 2 levels of government. Council has added debt to make dramatic catch-ups in roads, recreation facilities, and land inventory for parks, schools, and future projects, such as these right here at the LEC. The opposition, I mean, they love to highlight debt, whoever that is. But we are borrowing to build this community, our community, with a sound financial program to get things done. A lot of it is pay as you go as well, to build facilities and buy land that we need just as well the way we do it just to buy a home. If you saved up to buy a home, you'd never end up with a home. That's for me, and most of us anyway. Any politician can do nothing and call it a success. And we certainly have a lot doing exactly that. Debt is for land, facilities, infrastructure, things we can see and touch, not operating costs, not an inability to make operating decisions. We need roads, parks, recreation facilities. We need to finish gaps in our transportation network and greenways. We need to invest now where it will cost twice as much more later. What project, I like my favorite questions, what project should we cancel? Finishing the land acquisitions here at the Langley Event Center, which we did. The fire hall for Brookswood, where response times can be up to 15 minutes or more. The Jericho Reservoir, so Willoughby can have water pressure. Ice sheets for Langley Minor Hockey when we have added 70,000 people, set to add 70,000 more. How about 208th Street and just have left it as it was, where fire trucks can't get to calls for service? Oldeo Road, leave it 10 more years. The 20-acre athletic park next to the new high and middle school where the TOL committed to do it last term without a plan to fund it. We'll ensure our youth can play soccer and not rely on some other community to provide it for us. We did so long for so little to keep up with growth while adding so much development, as land values and housing prices went up and up and up, collecting no community amenity contributions. But here we are. It is not, for me, an either or. We can get things done, pay it off over time, and be way ahead of where we will end up otherwise. And keep our reserves healthy, but also working for us, not sitting in some bank account somewhere getting eroded away by inflation or land and construction cost increases. Some projects we are saving up for, like reservoir replacements. Some we will never get done if we aren't willing to borrow some of the project costs, and that's just the reality of it. We just won't get them. When we built, as a community, fabulous vision, we built the community at Langley Event Center, it was obviously ahead of its time. And look at it now. Imagine Langley without it. Today, what cost $70 million would be $250 million to replace this facility. And we're doing that again, in my opinion, thinking big for Langley's future. The opposition has made it clear again and again that they don't understand how municipal debt works. It's not a mortgage, it's affordable, and it's penny wise, pound foolish not to use it. It's all approved by the province inspector of municipalities, by Metro Vancouver, and by the Municipal Finance Authority. We are babysat to the nth degree, and they are approving it because our plan makes sense. It's not a deficit or operating costs and bureaucracy. It's money at 3.5% for land, parks, and roads that we will own forever. Culverts that will last 75 years. Facilities that we need paid back from growth and development, in some cases within 10 years or even less, not property taxes. Our debt will go up and then it will go back down. And once we have some of these things done, they're done as housing and growth continues. And one thing is obvious, I'm going to steal it from the new Prime Minister, because I liked it a lot, I wish I'd thought of it. A plan beats no plan every time. And our plan is working. We can see it right in front of us, and we are building our community again, not just building housing. And yes, while we move forward, getting things done at a pace we have not seen in a long time, we also have a lot of challenges to manage, acknowledge, and be aware of. It's taking years to complete projects like 28th Street and Glover Road. Provincial Water Act permits for ditches, permission from the Agricultural Land Commission for road projects in the Agricultural Land Reserve, archaeological assessments, land acquisition, design, adding water and sewer and other infrastructure at the same time, which makes sense, tendering, award reviews, committees, never mind BC Hydro, Shaw, and TELUS, not Fortis, they're great, that constantly delay and frustrate almost any major road project. Construction costs don't seem to stop rising, which makes me want to act faster, not slower. There are so many needs, and council just can't do them all right away. You see it on my Facebook page every day. Why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing that? That is a big challenge we have. We can't do it all right away. But we are getting to it. One project at a time, one budget at a time. Our local Langley Memorial Hospital remains inadequate. Big challenge for us. Why are you adding more housing year after year? There were some big promises from the government in the last election for it, and we're still waiting to hear on when we can expect those to proceed. Like our hospital, schools continues to be a real issue. When you look at the numbers, you can see why we need to put so much focus on athletic facilities for youth. On one hand, housing mandates demanding actually, that we build more. But even with the growth we have had and still have and are mandated to have, we have a school district facing real problems. And I looked up some numbers, I had some help with that, but looked up some numbers. In Vancouver, School District 39 has 52,000 students for Vancouver. Okay. 111 schools. Here, with 4 times less the population, we have half, 26,000 students in 45 schools. In 2024, our school district added 20 more portables, now at 146. By comparison, Surrey has 1 portable for every 230 students, and they're on the news. We're 4.35 portables per 1,000 students. In Langley, 1 portable for 180 students, not 230, and 5.62 portables per 1,000 students over that 4.35. And what has to be the worst per capita rate of portables in the entire province of British Columbia? And if we are not, please let me know who it has it worse. But regardless, these numbers speak for themselves. We are at least 6 or 7 schools behind. And by the Vancouver per student per school measure, we should have 10 more schools in place today for today's residents, let alone the next 50,000. Vancouver gets schools, we get portables. It's not right, and it's not good enough. And we're going to not stop talking about it. This is why we're seeing a lowering of service levels, such as cuts to busing service or unacceptable, to me anyway, field maintenance. Portables come out of the local education budget. So no wonder fields maintained by the province look like they do compared to what the TOL provides in Willoughby for Langley Senior Secondary or for Aldergrove Secondary. And to me, all students in Langley deserve the same, great fields to play on. And I'm told it's not a problem, but I hear more silence from the school district than advocacy. It needs to be addressed, and we need to work together on it. We really do, for Langley, not quotes in press releases. And we see the same basic inequity in healthcare, transportation. Look no further than Glover 10 Number Road. We heard this week, they're not even looking at it. And transit. This is why, in addition to the so-called housing needs report that I mentioned earlier, I think it's high time for a provincial services needs report for the Township of Langley to highlight what we need to see here to have the same service levels other communities in Metro Vancouver take for granted. I'm going to say it again. Let's call it a provincial services needs report for the Township of Langley. And of course, one big challenge is that we must find a way to deliver a community center for Willoughby, right-sized for the future, in the right location, for the population that it will be, not just what it is. And that is underway. Now that we're resolving some of the major deficiencies with so many big projects underway, once they're done, they're done. We won't need more ice for years. Soccer, we're good for a long time. With the investments we have made this term in public safety, the next council can focus on keeping up with growth more incrementally and focus on other priorities like more timely, proactive replacement of existing infrastructure. As I said before, a plan beats no plan every time. I'm still waiting for the alternative plan. Our plan is working, it's getting things done, and we can see and touch the results. It's truly an honor to be our mayor with this council, serving the Township of Langley to get so much done, large and small, advocating for what we need, making real progress for Langley in infrastructure, roads, water, parks, transit, recreation facilities, taking better care and upgrading our existing parks and facilities, supporting our user groups to support us, and to keep thinking about what kind of Langley we want to have when we're 200,000 or 250,000 people before we know it. Let's keep going. Let's get it right. So with that, thank you very much for coming tonight. Don't hesitate to reach out to me anytime. Thank you.
Again, I'm Richard Zussman from Global BC. I'm going to have an opportunity now to ask the mayor some questions. If you don't know, my day job is I cover the legislature in Victoria. It was very kind to be invited to be part of this today. Let's focus in on some provincial issues. You mentioned the province. You know, we know municipalities are a creature of the provincial government. Let's start with Bill 15. So for those of you who don't know, the legislature's in the midst of debating new legislation around infrastructure. You've been one of the mayors of Metro Vancouver pushing very hard to figure out ways to get infrastructure built more quickly. The province came forward with this legislation to do exactly that, but there's been pushback from Indigenous leadership, from municipalities. What do you make of Bill 15? And is this the right approach to help communities like the township build out its infrastructure?
Bill 15 is interesting to me because I had a relatively relaxed response to it when I first looked at it, and then I looked at it a bit more. You know, the Metro Vancouver and a lot of mayors have been, you know, really asking the province to speed up, right? Build schools, get things done, widen highways, and so on. You know, build the bridge or the tunnel, whichever it's going to be, right? And so, yeah, when they see them making some kind of an effort to have more options to speed up the process, you know, you sort of say, okay, great, let's have a look at that. In the township, it doesn't occur to me to ask council for a bylaw to bypass any process I want and approve anything I want. It doesn't occur to me to do that. It occurred to me to fix the process. That's the problem in the first place. So if your process is a problem and you need to pass a bill to bypass the process, maybe you just fix the process. And I think that's what's missing. And then, you know, I would have some concerns that any project can be declared, you know, of special interest and approved. We would have a couple of instances here in the township where I don't think we'd like to see that. We would like to see a process to just build things faster within a reasonable process and reform and fix the process. Passing a bill to bypass it seems like the wrong approach.
You've been tough on the province at times around different pieces of legislation. Do you think that's a good approach considering you need to rely on them heavily to help support the growth in this community?
I think it's a fair question, and I struggle with it all the time. If you don't say anything, then you're not advocating, and if you advocate, you're beating up on them. And you know, how do you highlight some of the failings of, say, the numbers I just listed for the school district and the school system, and now you're beating up on them? If you don't say anything, you're not doing your job. So I think it's a constant dilemma that's faced, and I think you'll see two approaches. One is to be a cheerleader for the government to try to get things, and another is to tell it like it is to try to get things.
I think voters in this community sent a message to the province. You know, in the last year, we've had a provincial election, federal election. Talk about the switch. You know, one thing I spent a lot of time at during the election was a map. You can see things change pretty dramatically out here. Voters in Surrey sent a message to the government. Voters in Langley sent a message to the government. Why do you think that's the case? And do you think that may help or hurt the development in places like Surrey and Langley, considering the NDP lost so many seats in these communities?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that they're governing for British Columbia. I mean, I don't look at the poll results in Aldergrove and compare it to Walnut Grove and say I'm going to give everything to Walnut Grove. Like, I don't look at it that way, and I would hope they don't look at it that way either. I mean, every student in Langley is a student of British Columbia. And if we have the greatest need, they should be dealing with it. You know, I think one of the ways to earn people's support is to listen to them and to try to solve the problem. You know, so I would hope that they don't take that approach, and you know, people are going to vote how they vote. I think in the last election, you know, we saw a lot of concerns that are specific to the township in Surrey. If we're growing so much with so many issues, I think coming out and demanding more was a bit tone deaf. And I think if there'd been more of a balanced plan, I think they would have been better received here.
What should people here expect from the province? You mentioned schools. You mentioned those rates of portables. We heard that famous promise in 2017 from John Horgan and the NDP. They'll get rid of portables in Surrey. Well, look, they have double-decker portables in Surrey now. There's more portables than we've ever seen before. You talk about your numbers. You have a rate of portables higher than that of Surrey. So where do we figure this out? Like, how do you find a way around this to ensure that the schools are built? You talk about, you have land here. Why aren't there schools going into those communities?
Yeah, what frustrates me, because they'll talk about whether we want to expand a hospital or build a new school, where are the staff going to come from? Yeah. Well, there's staff in the portables. Yeah. Somebody's cleaning the portable. So, you know, I think we would see a lot of progress, you know, if we could get a deeper understanding of where that $12 billion deficit is going. You know, if I were running a $12 billion deficit in the township, man, every road would be paved, and there'd be no rec center for everybody. So I would like to understand, if you have a deficit of that magnitude, like, where is it going? That's a lot of schools, and that's getting a lot of students out of portables. And so I take the approach that the province has a significant amount of resources, and I don't think we're expecting every road paved in the year. I hope we're not. I don't think we're expecting every school that could be out of portables is going to be done in a year. But I think to see progress, to see a plan, to see some kind of attention being paid to it, rather than just endless housing mandates.
You mentioned your role in Mayor's Council. There's going to be some pressure points coming. We've had a conversation in Victoria the last few weeks around how the future of transit is going to be funded. And the way transit works is different in different parts of Metro Vancouver. And Vancouver has a lot of infrastructure. Areas like the township doesn't have as much connectivity. What is your position on the conversations being had on funding? Like, do we need to be looking at options like vehicle levies on how to fund the future of transit in Metro Vancouver?
No, I don't think so. You know, I think the problem with the vehicle levy is it disproportionately punishes communities that don't have transit. So how do you put a vehicle levy on township residents when none of us, you know, very small percent, I'm not going to say none, but a very small percent of us, just compared to other Richmond Vancouver municipalities, have basic access to transit. So great, put a car levy for everybody that lives within a kilometer of a SkyTrain station. Let's start there. And, you know, that would be the way to do it, not just another blanket levy for everybody who owns a car. I think that's deeply unfair when service doesn't come along with it.
Yeah, and you know, the counter argument is, you know, if you build it, they will come. So if you get the money, you can start building out transit networks to places like the township. With the speed of growth here, is there a necessity to invest more in the transit options?
Of course. I don't think there's any doubt that we all want more transit. We send tens of millions of dollars a year to TransLink and do not get tens of millions of dollars in service. And the response is that, well, there's no people there, or it's all spread out, or the ridership is too low. And, well, if it takes an hour and a half to get to your destination, no wonder the ridership isn't there. And so it's a chicken and egg problem that I think we're going to solve here on 200 Street and hopefully on 208, the 80th, 202, and some other connections. And once those start, maybe we can get our ridership up and we can get connections to some other areas like Murrayville and Aldergrove when SkyTrain is here. But I have very low expectations of TransLink to deliver service in the Township of Langley. That's just the reality of it. They'll argue that the ridership isn't there and there's better money spent in other communities. It's tough when you see other communities have, I can't even keep track of how many SkyTrain stations they have and how much wealth they've generated from that, and that's been funded from other parts of the region. And then we don't see the same concern for putting that kind of transit infrastructure in place for the 1 million people living south of the Fraser.
Yeah, and it's obviously a bigger question about the issues. south of the Fraser. Like, it's not just transit that's underserved here. It's hospitals, schools, all of it. Mayor Locke spoke about this. You spoke about this as well. How do you ensure that south of the Fraser, especially these two big municipalities, have equal footing to the Burnabys, to the Richmonds, to the Vancouvers? Like, where do we find that drive to get the province to fund things here to the point that we're seeing it in other communities?
I think you need to see what the city of Surrey is trying to work on. I mean, they're the engine. They're the large municipality. If they lead an effort to try to coordinate and advocate more regionally than one city at a time, we're there. I mean, that's the approach that I think has to happen. You know, we've talked about, why do we all meet with ministers individually? Why don't we meet with them as the South of the Fraser group and say, because the issues are very similar. You know, if we hear about a hospital being built in Surrey and that's going to serve the township, then we should be advocating for more services on our border with Surrey if that's the direction the province is going to go. And I think unifying our voice is probably the only way, because the default is for it to go to Richmond and Vancouver and Burnaby.
You mentioned in your speech the issue of the RCMP with the city of Langley. Mm-hmm. Is there any thought, Mayor Locke went down this route to municipal police force. That was lots of fun, right, Mayor? We did some stories together about that. You gave me a hard time about it. You got your money eventually. Would it be something that you would think about here in the township?
No, not at all. Council's been very firm, township's been very firm in its commitment to the RCMP. That's not being considered that I'm aware of at all. It has no support from council that I'm aware of, and very committed to the RCMP as our policing provider. If the province goes in a different direction, well, we'll deal with that when they do that, if they do that. Hopefully they'll fund that if they're going to do that. But no, we're very committed to the RCMP. We're very committed to increasing funding for public safety, as I outlined. And, you know, the situation with the deintegration with the city of Langley is a long-standing goal that I heard a lot about last term. And we decided to move forward with it here. It's not anything to do with other than I think we're going in a different direction, and we prioritize public safety investment differently than they do.
Yeah, you know, I live in Victoria. We have challenges in Victoria around different municipalities relying on similar services. Are you worried at all about the tension points created between yourself and the city when it comes to issues like policing?
Not really. You know, I think we're all adults here, right? It's a policy objective. If there's a desire to make it personal at some points in time, it's not us doing that. It's not about any individual member of any council or staff member. It's a policy objective. And it was identified last term even, it was under discussion about how do we advance improving service levels for policing for all kinds of areas of the township, out as far as Gloucester or Overgrove. If, you know, chronically a significant portion of our members are in the city, even if we're getting some portion of cost recovery, it's not really relevant if you're trying to improve public safety in other areas. We have other basic, obvious issues. The RCMP detachment building is too small. And so, you know, if another municipality has 50 members in there, well, move them out. Because we need a building for the township. And so it's just honestly something as practical as space considerations. What is the future and why should we build another police station when we don't need to?
Right before I left the legislature this morning, they were tied up in the chamber around this conversation of M202, the bill around holding multiple jobs.
Well, thankfully, I know the difference between the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, at least. Yeah. So
tell me that difference, and what does Victoria need to do here? Because it could have an impact on the township around the decision made.
I think this is one of the issues that I really respect people that are not, you know, have some really hard questions about serving two roles at once. What I haven't heard a lot of is that recognition that being a councillor in the township is actually a part-time job. And you have people arguing in the legislature that it's a full-time job, and it's not. And I think you have to weigh the difference between spending $500,000 on a by-election, which it now would be, because we would have to ensure that what happened in Vancouver never happens here with hour-long waits. And so we estimate, staff estimated it would be somewhere between $450 and $500 to eliminate that risk. And do you do that, or do you fund two playgrounds? And you know, I think that's the hard decision. And what do you do if you ran for council and you made a contract with Langley residents and taxpayers to complete 4 budgets to implement a capital program. You have a responsibility to follow through on that. So I really respect someone who struggled a lot with that, was not taken lightly. And, I really said, we'll support whatever the decision is. And I really respect somebody that's taken a lot of heat, unnecessarily, I think, to follow through on commitments made and seek a different role. And that's their right. They've been elected to that role. I think we can govern just fine for another year before, year and a half before the next campaign. I think $500,000 for a by-election is a waste of money.
We're 2.5 years into this mandate, a year and a half left. When you look back at 2.5 years, what are you most proud of what you've accomplished so far?
I think a bit of a reset at the township was long overdue. So getting back to a culture of getting things done and making decisions. And, we've made some decisions that, of course, not everyone's going to be supportive of every decision we make. I mean, if the province made the decisions 80% of the time that I agree with, I'd be happy as a clam, right? And we really respect the idea that, whatever it is, we're at least going to make a decision. And we didn't have that last term. Everything was deferred and referred back to staff, and it just went around in circles for years. And at least we're making decisions, whatever they are. And I've been really thankful to have a council that is willing to work together, even when we maybe don't like each other every day. Maybe we don't agree on everything, but we're colleagues. We can go to the council table and we can make decisions. And I've really appreciated that a lot of the bickering has gone away that we saw last term. A lot of calling points of order just to interrupt people has gone away. We're really, I think, listening to each other even if we disagree, and decisions are getting made, and the platform that people voted for in 2022 is getting done.
I know there'll be a State of the City next year. This may be a better question for then, but is your plan to run again in 2026?
Well, I mean, I think for me, I'm gonna do it. What I've told everybody, I'll make that decision in Christmas. It definitely takes a toll on your life in a way that I did not know as a councillor, did not see as a councillor. But yeah, I think I'm pretty excited to finish off some of the stuff we've started, but I'm also open to the idea that, I don't have to be the mayor of the Township of Langley. I didn't run to be the mayor. I think it'd be really important and also know the decisions of some of my council colleagues, because it's really fantastic to serve with some of the people I have the pleasure of serving with. And I think hopefully we would make that decision as our group, who's going to run and why are we running. And I think once we decide why we're running, then we'll decide if we're running.
You mentioned in your speech splitting utilities away from property tax. Walk me through that decision. Why was it made, and what were the challenges that went into that, and how do you address some of the concerns you heard?
One of the benefits of being part of Metro Vancouver, because they spend a lot of time, and I've learned a lot by being a part of Metro Vancouver about different ways a bureaucracy can be operated and different policies that maybe we could import to the township in some areas. The way they manage their capital programs and other things is pretty cool. So there's a lot of things I could learn from, and I learned a lot about some of the other municipalities and talking to them about, they were shocked that we did not have a water metering program. They were shocked that people were paying an average. When I looked at some of the numbers around what that example was, what somebody pays in an apartment versus a house, I didn't think it was fair. And so you look at other municipalities, and like Surrey, for example, they brought in the same kind of a program. And as they're adding residents at a dramatic degree, their water usage is flat. And so everybody in the city of Surrey is paying less. And so when I get huge complaints on social media about it's outrageous that I'm paying this for water, I agree, and we're trying to fix it. So if we can all use a little bit less, we'll all pay a little bit less, but we have to do the reform to get there.
One of the things you mentioned in your speech as well was the relationship with the school district. It is unique here. Can you speak a bit about the partnership the township has with the district, where you see that going in the future?
I think it's going to be probably pretty similar. I think we're asking for, again, a little bit of a review of how much the township does for the school district and the province. And I think sometimes that's taken for granted. And I don't think anybody likes to be taken for granted, right? And so, we build 5-acre park sites for every elementary school now that, because of land and construction costs, is $30 billion per elementary school. And it's bankrupting and draining the parkland budget. So what was supposed to be for parks is now building sites for schools. And it may have made sense when land was $300 an acre. I think it's important to revisit it when land is $5 million an acre or $7 million an acre. The township, is under such significant pressure. Every development charges a tax, apparently, but it's actually building the park for the students. And if those are under downward pressure, then do we have the resources to build 10 schools in Brookswood? Do we have the resources to build 5 more schools in Willoughby and still have any money left over for parks? And I think it's unfortunate that even raising the question was somehow an insult. And I think it's important that we get back to working together, recognize that the school district has their issues and we have our issues, but at the end of the day, we want to get schools built for kids. And I think the township does more for its school district by far than any other city does for any other school district in the entire province. And I'm really proud of that and want to continue it.
Is that a good thing? Is that how it should be working?
And I think we've asked ourselves that question with council, and I think even reviewing it to consider it is a good thing because it has benefits and it has drawbacks. The drawbacks is it's draining the parkland budget. We don't have the money. Where's the money going to come from to build? Where's my actual park that I can have a picnic, right? And so, but if we go to the school district and say the province, okay, well, we're not going to do this anymore, and they build a school, now we end up with an unmaintained field next to a school. And then we have to still have some park spaces and athletic parks and other fields and playing fields and playgrounds. And so if we can combine those, it does make some kind of sense. I think it's problematic when it's shifted to the township carrying the entire burden for those amenities. And I think it's great to have a bit more of a partnership.
We've been doing a lot of stories on Global News about the Metro Vancouver Board and about the way that money's been spent there. I know there's been frustration from taxpayers in Metro Vancouver around the way that their money is being spent. Are things being managed the right way at the Metro Vancouver Board? And what do you say when residents ask you about your role on the board, about how the tax dollars are being spent?
I've got Mike Hurley. Yeah, I've got Mike Hurley's cell number here.
Focus BC next week if you want, Brenda.
Yeah. I mean, you asked me about my role at Metro. I mean, Metro Vancouver, it's interesting. There was just a video put out by Justin McElroy, which I think captured it well. How do you get anything done with a board of 41 people? And I think that there's been a lot of talk about reducing the size of the board and having fewer, stronger voices that actually, so this is, the way the Mayor's Council works potentially, where you're not seeing, I think, some of the same controversy. I've seen a very powerful bureaucracy at Metro Vancouver that I think the board doesn't have complete control over. And I think that's why we're seeing some of the decision-making going on there. Why do I have to read hear on the news that the chair of Metro Vancouver didn't know about X, Y, Z that's in the news, right? That's not, and I think that's not Mike Hurley's fault. And so I think I look forward to having some people that really want to maybe see some change at Metro. And I'm hopeful the province is going to pay attention to the governance review, and that can lead to some reform that I think would lead to a more responsive Metro Vancouver.
Yeah, does there need to be a greater role for a municipal auditor general, or for the auditor general in Victoria now to have a greater role to deal with issues around accountability? Because, as you know, the province or federal officials can't spend in the same way that they do at Metro Vancouver Board and other municipal entities. Does there need to be more accountability in that regard?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's pretty obvious. What occurred with the North Shore wastewater treatment plant and people are getting their bills is outrageous. And a lot of us did everything we could to try to stop that getting passed on to the region as a whole. The south of the Fraser sewerage area, 75% of that project was paid for by residents other than the North Shore. And that's a model that isn't fair when you have projects, ballooning beyond the budget that they were originally approved for. And it's heartbreaking to see people, on my social media or emailing me like, this is outrageous. And well, it is outrageous. And one of the problems you have is the federal government and the province not assisting with the cost of that infrastructure, though. Relying on development cost charges or property taxes as the only two mechanisms to substantially fund these projects is not sustainable. And so once again, it's up to the federal government and the province to come up with a plan with Metro Vancouver and local governments to determine if a project is of that magnitude. Is it reasonable for local government to fund it?
Federal election just wrapped up. We have a new Minister of Housing. He is from British Columbia. He is former Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson. Do you think this is to the advantage of British Columbia to have a housing minister who understands the crisis here? He's also a mayor that was in charge when housing prices went up at the highest rate that we've seen them go up in Vancouver. What sort of relationship do you hope to have, the township hope to have, with the new housing minister?
With a new one, for sure. There were a lot of issues with the previous one, governing by tweet, putting tweets out. There's just some really bizarre stuff going on. It's interesting to listen to an interview with the housing minister who seems to understand finally the difference between a DCC and a CAC. That was pretty refreshing, honestly. Something as basic as that, the last guy didn't know. And so, how do you have a conversation with the housing ministry when they don't know the difference between Greenbelt in Ontario and Greenfield in BC? So it was challenging to break through that. And sometimes we got a little frustrated with it. The Housing Accelerator Fund, the wiring money to Bowen Island to accelerate housing, it's absurd.
Right.
And so I'm hopeful that, the new minister will, having served in local government to that degree, will have a lot more understanding and experience to bring to bear. So I'm hopeful.
And what does, hope look like? What success look like for asks from Ottawa? Because I know, remind me, but your money, because of the DCCs, the money from the Housing Accelerator here was delayed, right? Because of those?
No, we actually ended up not getting any because it was oversubscribed. And the other problem we made, ironically, if you can believe this, we made so many reforms to the development procedures process in the first 12 months. We then applied for half. They said, well, you already did everything, so we don't need to pay you any money.
Right.
Ridiculous, right? And so other municipalities hadn't done it and had to be bribed to do it or put it in their grant application. We had to come up with a bunch of new stuff to come up with to try to get this grant money. The process was deeply political and frankly insulting to communities like ours that didn't have to be bribed to make these reforms. And so hopefully that can be fixed. Hopefully that can be reformed. That communities that can accelerate housing through construction of detention pond infrastructure, we could open up more housing units than you're ever going to see in Bowen Island. And it didn't work out that way. So maybe someone who's served in local government will hopefully have a different approach and a refreshing approach. I don't know him. I've never met him. I don't come with the baggage of his service as mayor. If the Prime Minister is serious about funding infrastructure for housing, that would be a good conversation to have. Hopefully he'll have it with us and not just developers. And then we can hopefully come up with a program that will fund infrastructure and reduce those startup costs that they claim are preventing housing.
I went to my son's class yesterday, a grade 4-5 split. They just started civics. And I asked them, what part of your life is affected by politics? So they mentioned all sorts of things, right? School, roads, parks. And largely you end up figuring that the most things that impact kids are things that are the responsibility of municipal governments. I think for a lot of people, it's like that. It has a big role in their lives. At the same time, you have very limited tools when it comes to actually bringing in revenues to pay for these things. The one tool you have is property taxes. How are you ensuring that you balance that? You know that there's a need out there, and at the same time, you're trying to find a way to keep property taxes as low as possible.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on the property tax question because, in the township, if you look at the graph, and nobody really wants to hear this, of course, we are the lowest taxed major municipality in Metro Vancouver for anybody with more than 50,000 residents by far. And we're going to maintain that. And we spent a lot of time doing that. Of the tax increases in the last 3 budgets, we're in the bottom 4 of 21 municipalities. And I pay a lot of attention to this and say, well, that can get deferred and council can then consider waiting on that one. And cutting some programs and cutting some costs, restructuring some debt, and I think using some of the tools that are available to us more creatively, similar to what Metro Vancouver does for some of their capital projects, and really maximize the existing revenue for property tax, not just simply looking to increase it, which what a lot of other municipalities are doing, like our neighbor, 30% in 3 years. That's not reasonable. And so I spend a lot of time, working on the budget and spending a lot of time to understand it, to ensure that we continue to solve as many of these problems as we can within the revenue stream that we have.
Let's talk about your neighbor. People laugh about this idea. Township of Langley, a city of Langley, why aren't they the same thing? If you were to combine services, could you not deliver things more effectively? Is this a conversation worth having around there being one Langley?
Well, I think we've been having it around the RCMP detachment. We'll get a press release from the city of Langley outlining how great it is to have an integrated, shared RCMP detachment for better services, lower costs, and shared resources. That doesn't seem to apply to any other department, does it? And so I'm a bit confused by that. But it's not something the township, I think, as an entity, is going to do much about. I think, from my opinion, you can have a conversation with them, but it would have to be, I think, a long one. And from what I'm getting, they're pretty hostile towards us. So, are you going to try to push through that? I mean, I don't know. I think it's a big fat I don't know. There's plenty to work on in the township. But I grew up in Langley City, and I think it could be a lot better than it is.
Focus back on your community. You've talked about managing parks and managing recreational services. There are more young families here. You mentioned that with the school numbers. How do you keep up with this demand? You mentioned playing soccer at midnight. I'm sure parents here have to wake up at 5 a.m. I don't know what time in Victoria, at 6 a.m. You go online, and I call it the Parent Olympics, because you refresh and try to get your kids into skating or swimming. I'm sure it's even worse here than it is in Victoria. How do you keep up with that demand to just get people the basic needs they want to get their kids into those programs they want?
Well, why don't you and I talk to Mr. Stair offline, and we can try to get multi-season waiting lists implemented so people don't have to do the Olympics every season. And not reset the waiting list every 3 months. There are other ideas we can do, because I have asked a simple question. If you can sign up for kindergarten before the child is born, why can't you sign up for a swimming lesson before the child is born? And
how do you win? It's a lottery. Whoever gets to the swimming, of course. But if we don't have the spaces, then what's the point of... That's what happened in Vancouver. People put themselves on a list of an unborn child.
I spent so much time educating myself about this, and what I've learned is it's a bit of a bouncing act. Everybody wants Wednesday night at 6 p.m. or everybody wants Tuesday night and if they don't get Tuesday night at 6 p.m., they couldn't get in. But if you want that, then maybe you can wait a year for that, if that's the only time it's filled. I've been asking to get that to council, and hopefully we can do that. I think the issue is you just making sure there's enough capacity. So when you listen to the numbers that of the students, the quantity of students that we have per unit of population here is why we're seeing such massive, oversized demand for recreation facilities, aquatics, soccer fields, ice sheets, all of these things, way beyond what maybe some think we should needing to be doing. It's because of the nature of our community. It's because of the families are setting up here in Langley. And I think it's an ongoing issue that we're going to have to continue to work on, and I'm working on it all the time with council to say, how do we make the process easier, try to eliminate some of these absurdities of the refresh at 12:01 in lunchtime when the nurse emails me and says she's busy working and she never gets in, right? Her kid never gets in. And that's just terrible. It's ridiculous. We've got to we're trying to get there. We're making reform after reform incrementally and really working with our management team to implement these things if council enforces them. So you highlight the issue, which is based on capacity, but also just how we run the municipality, and that to continue to try to evolve a customer service attitude.
Where are we at for a pool in Willoughby?
It's a long process. I have learned that building a community center is a long process of public consultation, right sizing, ensuring that it's based on the future, not just the current needs, and put in the right location and fundable. The Willoughby Community Centre, for what we need, is going to be about $250 million. And it is staggering to me what's happening with community centres. In Burnaby, they're $350 if you're following the news. Some of these community centres are over $300 million now. It's not just the township that's having this issue. They're cancelling projects in other places because they're just not affordable. And so it might take us a little bit longer to get there, but I'm pretty committed that it's obviously something that has to happen for 125,000 people. It didn't help that previous councils didn't charge community amenity contributions for 15 years and left $200 million on the table.
We just are trying to settle this issue in Victoria as well, where there's a vote to borrow money to fund a community centre, long-awaited community centre and pool. Debt is part of this as well. Like, is it worth going into further debt to fund these amenities, which you've described are desperately needed for people? They move to places like Langley to help support, housing is more affordable than it is.
So I'll give away a little bit that the opposition's very focused on the debt number. They should be focused on debt service, because debt service is actually how it's measured by MFA. And so the debt service has been structured, I think, incredibly well, that no one revenue source is significantly oversubscribed to deliver that project. And so you can wait for 5 years to save up the money to build 208 Street and have it cost 30% more, or you can borrow half the project cost and deliver it today and pay 3% over that 10 or 15 year period from the revenue source that was going to pay for it anyway. And I think you don't want to overuse that model to overextend, and we're not. But you also want to be, I think, fairly realistic that it's the only way some of these projects are going to get delivered because of their cost. And then Metro Vancouver labeled it today generational equity, which is interesting to think about. One of the reasons the finance department and other departments look at debt as valuable, because if you're paying for the capital of that project over 30 years, the people who are using it are the ones paying for it. And if you move away, you didn't pay for it and then move away. If you move in, you're paying for it partially. And so there's a lot of ways to look at it. And if you're an opposition person, oh, debt's terrible, we're bankrupting our children's future. We're actually building our children's future. We're not bankrupting it. And municipalities can't go bankrupt. The province doesn't let us go bankrupt. Everything is babysat to a significant degree, which gives me a lot of comfort that we're not pushing it too far either. And so there's a plan for it to go up. There's a plan for it to go down. And we haven't been using debt to fund the entire project a lot. We've been using a lot of half and halves, or quarter. And so that has made a lot of difference in that there's some cash and then there's some debt. And it's been a good balance that I think we've found. We struggle with it when we have a project of that magnitude. Right. And I think a lot of communities are struggling with it.
Should there be better access to the province to support infrastructure projects like pools? These are municipal responsibilities largely, but as we know, they can collect more revenues. Should there be an ability to access money from the province to pay for things like pools, roads?
Yeah, credit where credit is due. The NDP government gave us $23 million for the Ice Sheets project. It was fabulous. Langley had not seen, we got 100, but I won't quibble. Look at what we got, not what the other person got, right? $23 million to put straight into that project, and it got it underway actually 6 months quicker. So there has been, some support from the provincial government to support some of these projects. The problem is they didn't do it again. They didn't do it again after that. So we have a $12 billion deficit without some of that capital investment into these communities when these projects are really hard to fund. And yeah, I would like to see more. I think the problem is, though, that I've heard directly from the NDP that they feel that we could easily raise property taxes a lot more to match Ontario and other provinces. And so they are looking to us, even on transit, to say, nope, you've got lots of property tax room. You should be using that before you're calling us. And I think you won't find a single mayor that would agree with that.
No, you think the public has any appetite? There's one taxpayer. Do you think there's an appetite to pay more property tax?
No, there isn't. The property tax statement is being tapped out, but it's not being tapped out by the Township of Langley. Almost half of it is going to school tax, right? and the TransLink and Metro Vancouver. And if you include utilities, it's a lot more than that. And so there's a lot of focus on what the township is doing, and I can't express to you how frustrating it is to spend hours of my life in the budget process finding an extra 0.5% to have TransLink come along and do 20%. You can't understand how frustrating that is. And that, I think, is the core problem, is that everybody is chewing at the property tax statement, eating up what should be going to local government.
It's probably a frustration only matched by sitting in construction traffic. You do a lot of construction out here. There's a lot of road that needs to be built. When can people expect the construction to stop?
I love it. Fix the roads, Eric. Stop fixing the roads. It is the dilemma that we've had, is that we do not have a single finished north-south corridor through Willoughby. And very soon, we're going to have at least one or two. And that's going to make a big difference. And so the problem is when you do detours and stuff, there's nowhere to detour to that isn't rapidly trying to be finished. But once it's finished, it's finished. And then we'll finally start to have a real major node network come together here in Willoughby especially.
You mentioned a few times in your speech, and we have a few minutes left, around social media comments. I long stopped looking at my social media comments. I was surprised to say, I guess as an elected official, you have to pay attention to what people write there. What's that world like on social media, when I find that people behave much differently when you see them in person compared to what they write online? What is life like as the mayor on your social media?
I enjoy it. I get a lot of comments about how entertaining it is for everybody to follow. I'll get insulted, and I ignore the insult and look at the complaint or look at the issue. You can insult me, that's fine. I don't care. But if the complaint is legit, I'll respond. And I won't block people or any of that stuff. I only block people when they're attacking other people, not attacking me. And, they're commenting on every person, insulting them. Okay, then we'll block you for that. But it's a place to engage with me that, I think I try to keep up with. But I also learn a tremendous amount. And again, if people want to be insulting, that's fine. It doesn't bother me. But if there's an issue there, and I know a lot of other people who aren't insulting me feel the same way. And if it's legit, let's fix it.
Is that the best place? There may be people here concerned about, the job you're doing or their services and community. Is that the best place to go with your concerns?
No, probably not. If you have a good concern and you want to advocate for an outcome, you should send an email with an itemized concern, proposed solutions, photographic evidence, and it's very quick to move that into the system and get that to council. So, emailing me saying, Mayor, you suck, why is this not happening? That's probably not going to get processed as quickly as the first version, but I'll eventually get to that email too, right?
Yeah.
But there is a way, and so you'll see me, I do refer people to email all the time. Say, email me, get it to me, and then they'll say, well, you haven't responded in a month. And I went and looked at it. Yeah, you're right, I haven't gotten to that yet, but I'm going to. And so it depends on what the goal is. The goal is to engage and have a conversation. If the goal is to perceive a specific objective, there's different ways to go about it. But if you have something on social media, I itemize it just the same.
Let's finish here. You mentioned you're still contemplating that decision around a year and a half from now about re-election. But what do you hope to accomplish between now and then? What is coming up here? You mentioned big things ahead. What are those big things that you mentioned?
Yeah, well, I touched on it in the last budget coming up here. I want to set up the next council, whoever it is, for some success, either way. So new parks master plan, some capital planning, some debt management planning to outline for the next council, whoever it is, and especially if it's not me, that knowledge is there and some of these ideas are in the bureaucracy that can be carried forward. It's really important that we finish some of these projects, no matter who's there, and leave Langley in a better place than we found it if we're not reelected. And that's pretty important to me, right? So there's a lot of I think some T's to be crossed and I's to be dotted on some of the things we've done this term, and then really set up a focus for the 5-year financial plan going into next term that focuses on some pretty chronic problems that we've identified. 40th Avenue being closed for almost a year is completely unacceptable. Another closure on 248th. And what we've identified, we can't solve in a year, but we could put a plan in place, which is, not pushing every bridge or culvert to the brink to try to postpone replacing it. That's obviously not working. We have reservoirs, $80 million liability in reservoirs that we're facing next term. We're saving money for that. It's important for the next council to know that. And so there's a number of things that in the next year, I want to finish a bunch of smaller reforms, things we can get done, finish what we've started, continue to design a bunch more capital projects, get them shovel ready because it takes so long to do that. Continue to beg Rob to get me multi-season waiting lists on swimming lessons, and a number of other things that can be carried forward no matter who it is.
All right, Mayor. Thank you for taking my questions, and thank you for doing this. Bit of housekeeping before you can give the mayor a round of applause.
Thanks to Richard as well.
Few housekeeping things before you say goodbye. Thank you to the folks here at the Langley Event Center. I don't think you realize how lucky you are in Langley to have a facility as incredible as this. So thank you to all the staff to make tonight possible. I'm going to do a demonstration here. So the tulips you can take home. The vases you cannot. So leave the vases on the table. The tulips you can take home. And there is extra food available, I am told. So there'll be some goodie boxes outside for those who want food. And again, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thanks everybody for coming.